Remember, people are trying to live and fulfill their highest values. If you help them, the way you speak and to communicate with them in a way where they're going to get their highest values met, they'll take on what you ask them to do. If you're a coach or a consultant and you're working with clients and you find that sometimes compliance or their application of what you're recommending is low, I'd like to share with you some ideas on how to enhance it. How to enhance the probability that your coaching clients are doing what you say. I learned something about 40 years ago when I was doing consulting and speaking for consulting companies and taking on clients, health professionals predominantly in those days. And I noticed that I would see at a conference, a management group, consulting group, certain clients there. And I noticed that some would really take off and do extraordinary with the insights that they were gaining from the coaching they were getting and the management they were getting. And then I noticed that other people were floundering. And I thought, And I would sometimes see sort of an autocratic behavior from the coach or the consultant, kind of condemning or judging the person for not applying it. You're not disciplined. You're not doing what I've said. Da, da, da. And I noticed that and I thought, that's interesting. Are they not disciplined? Are they not this? Or is there some sort of an internal conflict going on inside their psyche about taking those actions? And I was puzzled by that. And then I would see them leave that consulting company or management company. And then I would see them in another one that I was speaking at. And now suddenly the same client is flourishing and booming under this new consultant and new management company. And I would chat with them and I would say, you were with this other company and you didn't take off. And now you're taking off. What do you think the difference is? And we narrowed it down. And I found out, and I already knew some of it. I had suspicion, but I really narrowed it down by interacting. They would say things like, I just couldn't do what they were asking me to do. It just wasn't me. And this was a real interesting observation. It wasn't me. Not everything they asked was a no. I couldn't do it, but parts of it. And so that would hold them back and limit their package that they were presenting. So I basically found out that it was value driven. And I realized that as long as somebody asks you to do something, a coach, consultant asks you to do something, that inside your head, you perceive more drawbacks and benefits, more disadvantages and advantages, and it goes against what you value. Or you think that the repercussions of doing it will lead you to go against something you value, you'll automatically put up a barrier and stop and hesitate and procrastinate and frustrate yourself because you'll be expecting yourself, because they're your authority, because you inject their values into your life. You think, I should be doing this, but I'm not doing it. Anytime you hear yourself, I should, I ought to, I supposed to, I got to, I have to, I must, I need to do it, it's an injected value from some authority, but it may not match your own top values, and so you have internal conflict. So you resist and you procrastinate, hesitate, and frustrate. So I found out that the individuals that were having difficulty, it was going against their values. So let me give you an example. I had a gentleman that said, no matter what I do, I can't seem to get past this certain amount in my business, my practice. And I said, okay, so what are you afraid is going to happen if you did all of a sudden just doubled it? Just took off. What are you afraid is going to do it? And he said, and he had in his brain an association with another friend of his that doubled his practice and really grew his practice and ended up in a divorce. Because the amount of effort it took to grow the practice made it where all of a sudden there was clash with the relationship. Now, this gentleman had a higher value on relationship and family than the individual that had higher value on business that was able to forsake the family for the business and divorce. But he had a higher value on family. And because of that, he was not going to do, because of the associations he made with the other client, the other guy that went through a divorce when he doubled his business, he says, I can't take that risk. So he's hesitating because in his mind, he's got more drawbacks and benefits. So that's the reason why. And so that's why I basically have to, and when I'm working with people, I have to go through there and clear out that baggage that's sitting there. Because sometimes the advice you give them is solid advice, but in their mind, they've got associations, previous associations that are challenging. So the question is unless we either dissolve those previous experiences and associations or revamp those and reassociate them, they're going to hesitate. So I had a gentleman that basically was afraid to do that. And I said, well, how could it help your marriage if you were to double your business? He says, well, if I double my business, my wife would, she's always bitching because I'm not home enough. I'm already too busy. I'm already having too many hours. If I was to double it, in his mind, he thought if you double it, it's going to take twice as much work. Not necessarily so. You could delegate more and actually have less time in the office and have twice as many patients. But he wouldn't think of that. In his mind, he just thought if I double my business, I won't be home. I'll take more effort there. My wife will start things. I'll end up in a divorce. I don't want that. It's not worth it. I won't do it. Yet he's paying money for a consultant to give him advice. And the advice he's giving him is solid advice. But he can't do it because he's got that wound. He's got that wound watching his buddy going through a divorce and what he went through and all the frustrations he went through because he grew his practice. So in his mind, if I ask him how specifically is growing your practice and doubling it, how's it going to help your family and relationship? And he couldn't see it. If he couldn't see it, he's not going to do it. And I said, so how could it? And we sat down and we revamped and kind of a Skinner operant conditioning on there. I did what I call the Demartini method, which is a series of questions to help you see new associations with perceptions. And I basically helped him see where the upsides were. Well, if he doubled his business, he would end up having all of a sudden more efficient time usage. He would end up hiring more people to delegate more things. In fact, that would help him double his business. In fact, we came up with strategies on how to delegate so he would actually have freer time and how to prioritize what he was doing so he would have more time to be with his family. We also then prioritize how building that business is going to help the kids, because one of the highest values on the wife's with the kids. How will it help the kids? And how is spending time with the kids helping the business growing? And we made some links. And anytime two values are closer together on the hierarchy of values, they enhance each other. Anytime they don't see the relationship, they hinder each other. So I asked him that question and made him come up with ways of doing it. And the moment he saw how he could get what he wanted building his business and still keep his marriage, he got a tear in the eye and his business flourished, took off, because he was no longer resistant to it. So anytime you're working with a client, they have a hierarchy of values. If you don't know what the hierarchy of values is, it's crucial to know, because that's going to tell them whether they're going to take action or not on what you're going to recommend. On my website, drdemartini.com, there's a free value determination process. You're welcome to use it. It takes 30 minutes. You can have the client go through that process. You can go through it with them. And then the process of doing it, you can make sure that you really know what their values are. So when you're communicating, when you're talking in terms of their values, remember, people are trying to live and fulfill their highest values. If you help them in the way you speak and to communicate with them in a way where they're going to get their highest values met, they'll take on what you ask them to do. If you can't, they're going to resist it because they're going to see it interfering with what they value most. So you need to know what the values are. Then you need to practice the art of how is their values not wrong? How is their values serve you? Because if you don't see how it serves you, you'll talk down to them and try to project your values onto them and try to get them to live in your values instead of honor theirs. It's when you communicate what you value in terms of what they value that you get the greatest compliance, the greatest buy-in, the greatest action. In other words, I used to have patients come into my office and they would say, well, I've had this shoulder pain for 4 months, but you're just now coming in. Well, there were 4 months you were in pain, but you didn't come in. So it wasn't the pain that brought you there. So I used to ask him, what specific high priority thing in your life is this pain now starting to interfere with that's making you decide to come in? And they said, well, the other day I was driving on the freeway and I couldn't turn my neck and the shoulder was sore and everything else. I couldn't look and I almost got rammed by a 24-wheeling truck and almost got killed. And I realized I better do something about it because I can't turn my neck because my shoulder and neck is all tight. So they didn't come in because of the pain. They came in because they almost killed themselves. I had a woman come in and says, the reason I did it is because I dropped my child because my shoulder was sore. So there's reasons why people do what they do. And sometimes what you assume it is, and you project onto them what it is, it's not really what's driving them. So finding out the dominant buying motive, finding out the dominant value, finding out what's really driving them is important if you want to get compliance. Because if you talk and communicate with that, I used to tell my clients that were into golfing, I said, if we do what we do, you'll be able to get that score back down and you'll be able to get that golfing back on track. If I tell them about their pain, they didn't listen. But if I talked about golf, they did. So just know that if you communicate, care enough about the individual to find out what they value most, and care enough to communicate effectively in what you want them to do in terms of what their values are, highest values, highest values. If you do that, your compliance will go up. That's why I teach people the breakthrough experience, because I teach them about values. I teach them how to communicate values, how to prioritize values, how to discern values in people, how to effectively communicate what you want in terms of their values. Because if they don't see how they're going to win out of it, they're going to feel manipulated and controlled. If they feel how they're going to win out of it, they're going to feel cared and loved. And it's the way, and that's really what you want. You want people to feel cared for and loved and appreciated. And you do if you respect them in their value system. That's why I teach the breakthrough experience, because in the breakthrough experience, I teach them how to do that. I also teach them how to dissolve all the emotional baggage that's causing those changes. See, that wound that he saw that his friend go through with a divorce, and the wounds that he's gotten because of his wife being upset because he's home late, those wounds are making those decisions. And I have a method called the Demartini method to dissolve those wounds, so you have a clear, balanced perspective. And then you can communicate more effectively with them and not have those unconscious wounds, those impulses and instincts that set you off before you can even think clearly. And they're neutralize them. That way you can more effectively communicate with your clients, and they'll get more compliance. People want a value fulfilled. And by the way, when you ask people what they value, I assure you, I've been doing it for 46 years. And the reason I developed the method I did on the value determination, which you can get on my website, drdemartini.com, is because people will tell you what they think is valuable and it's not. I ask people how many want to be financially independent. Everybody puts their hand up, but less than 1% actually do it. So what they say they want and what they actually want are two different things. So don't go by what they just say. Go by what their life demonstrates is important. That's why if you go on my website and do the value determination process, it'll be an eye-opener. If you're a coach, this will be gold to you, because you'll learn about what they are really committed to, not what they say. Because what they say and what they commit to and what their life is demonstrating are not always the same. In fact, rarely are, not initially at least. So once you find out what their values are, and once you know how to dissolve the emotional baggage which is driving those values, you have a powerful tool on helping get more compliance, and so they're more likely to do it. So instead of sitting there and wondering why they're not doing what you say, you have a solution. And that solution is caring enough about another human being to communicate what you really value in terms of what they value, what you really know will help them grow their business or life or health, and help them get what they want in life. But find out what it really is, and then master the art of communicating it. That's what I teach in the breakthrough experience, and also how to dissolve all the emotional baggage which is driving those values and confusing people. See, if you put people on a pedestal, you'll inject their values and cloud the clarity of your own. If you put people in pit, you'll also cloud your judgment on them. And those clouded states make people say they want something when they really don't. And they sometimes have fears about what they say they want. They have fears about it, undermining it. So come to the breakthrough experience where I can show you how to dissolve the baggage that they're carrying, and also in your own life, because you may be doing the same thing, and also how to the art of communicating what you value in terms of theirs. Your compliance will go up, your fulfillment in your coaching business will go up, and you'll realize that there's nobody out there worth a label, but there is somebody out there worth serving. And that person that you serve is most effectively served if you communicate what you want in terms of what they want.